Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. This is now another MCQ paper. This will be the November 17 question paper 1-1, and we're going to do the first 20 questions. Starting with the first question, which is number 1. The diagram shows cells in the epidermis of a leaf. So how have we got this? We have taken the leaf, and then from the bottom layer or the top layer, we have taken a layer of it. We've peeled off a layer. So the diagram shows cells in the epidermis of a leaf. Now to complete the diagram, which structural features should be added to the cells P and Q? Now cell P is a epidermal cell and cell Q is a guard cell. So to the guard cell, which is cell Q, we need to add chloroplasts. So that is why the answer to this is C. You do not add any chloroplast to P, you add only a nucleus to P. So please remember P is the epidermal cells. So you add a nucleus to it somewhere here, right? And you add no chloroplast because epidermal cells have no chloroplast. But in cell Q, what do you need to add? Cell Q, you need to add a chloroplast. So there are chloroplasts inside the guard cells. So chloroplasts, and also you have to remember is that already the nucleus has been added, so no nucleus needs to be added. This is the nucleus. So nucleus is present, but the chloroplasts are not present. So that is why the answer was you added a nucleus to P. You added a nucleus to P. And you added chloroplast to Q. So this is how we were supposed to do this question. Then coming on to question number 2. Which movement of a substance in plants is an energy consuming process? And that was simple. Nitrate uptake by root hair cells. Absorption of carbon dioxide by palisade is diffusion. Loss of water into the air spaces of a leaf is evaporation. Transport of water up through the xylem is mass flow. Transport of water up through the xylem, that's the transpiration pull or the suction force or the mass flow. Question 3. The diagram shows the direction of water movement from one cell to another in a plant root. So we have cell P and cell Q, and you see the movement of water is across this in this direction from cell P to cell Q. So cell with a higher water potential had to be P because the direction is P to Q. So cell with a higher water potential, so it would either be in A or B. Now process by which water moves, well, it can't be active transport. It has to be diffusion and osmosis. Because through the cell wall is diffusion, because that's not a partially permeable layer. But through the cell membrane, it would be a partially permeable membrane. So it is both. So this was the answer to it, diffusion and osmosis. Then coming to question number 4. According to the lock and key, what is the lock? And what is the key for the enzyme? Lipase. Now, as you know, lipase would be the lock because that is the enzyme and the enzyme is the lock and the key is the substrate. This is the key. So this is what we had to understand is that the enzyme is always the lock, and in previous questions you've seen that active site is where it's on the lock. So the lock or the enzyme would be lipase and the key would be lipids, which would be the substrate for the enzyme lipase. Then coming on to question number 5, which characteristic is the result of a deficiency of magnesium in plants? Large green leaves, purple spots on leaves, reduced root growth, yellow area between leaf veins. So magnesium ions causes the leaves to become yellow. Why? Because magnesium is needed for the chlorophyll molecule. So yellow leaves is a typical sign of magnesium deficiency in plants. If the soil is deficient in magnesium, then you get these yellow colored leaves of plants. Now, as you can see, these are typical magnesium deficiency diagrams in which you can see the yellowing of the area between the veins. Either there's yellowing of the veins, or as it says, yellowing of the veins and edges of the leaf. So you can see how this whole edge of the leaf has become yellow. Now this has become yellow. So magnesium deficiency is yellowing of veins and edges of the leaves can sometimes have a marbled appearance. This is again, you can see here a lot of the yellowing of the leaves. So all this area here is yellowing of the leaves, which you can see in between the veins. So again, going back to the question which we were doing, this is what I wanted you to see the appearance of it when it is because of magnesium deficiency. Magnesium in the soil is less, and that results in these sort of structures of the leaves. And I'll just clear this up for you all to have a look at it and understand what I'm saying when I say there is magnesium deficiency. As you can see here, it was yellow areas between leaf veins. So this is very typical of magnesium in plants, deficiency of magnesium in the soil, and so less magnesium available to the plant. Question 6, when is carbon dioxide absorbed and when is it released by an ecosystem such as a tropical rainforest? So it is absorbed during daylight and it is released during darkness. During daylight, of course, there's photosynthesis, so the carbon dioxide is going to be absorbed. And during night, when there's only respiration, then it is going to be released. So carbon dioxide, as it is during the day, the cell is also respiring, the plant is also respiring, but then, of course, photosynthesis is more than respiration. Then coming on to question 17, now this has been mentioned in your exam report, and I'll be talking of the exam report at the end of this video, so that you know what is an exam report. And as it has been mentioned in the exam report, it says many candidates found the question challenging as they were unfamiliar with the structure and function of the cuticle. So the ones which have the ones which have these, I'm going to mark them with a star. So these were the difficult questions, and these are the ones which you need to be looking into because they're probably going to be repeated again and again. So what describes the upper cuticle of a leaf? The upper cuticle of a leaf, which is a non-cellular layer, and then you have the upper epidermis cells. So a thin non-cellular layer preventing water loss from the leaf. So it's not a layer of cells. It's a permeable layer allowing water to enter the leaf. No, it is impermeable to water. In fact, that's why it protects it from cuticular transpiration. So this is what you have to understand about that. Then coming on to question number 8, which is essential for the healthy growth of teeth in a baby? So you know calcium and vitamin D are only required for healthy bones and teeth. So calcium was the answer. This was simple. And coming on to question number 9, the diagram shows part of the alimentary canal and associated organs. Which part would contain high concentrations of glucose and amino acids 4 hours 4 hours after eating a meal? So basically A is the esophagus, B is the bile duct, and C is the large intestine. So the only option left was D, which is going to be the hepatic portal vein, which is carrying the blood vessel, the blood supply from the intestines to the liver. So basically, this was the one. This was the hepatic portal vein, which was coming from the intestines, and all this was carrying the blood to the liver. This is the liver, and this was the hepatic portal vein. So why would it contain high concentrations of glucose and amino acids? Because they would be digested and absorbed and would enter the hepatic portal vein and would then, because 3 hours the food stays in the stomach and then it will move into the small intestines. So the answer to this was D, which is the hepatic portal vein, which would be very rich in glucose and amino acids after eating a meal. Question 10 is another one of those difficult papers that says in the exam report the role of bacteria in producing mouth acid was not well understood. So after eating, the pH of the mouth decreases. Which statement explains this decrease? Bacteria release acids because there are lots of sugary food which are sticking to your teeth. So this of course results in the bacteria releasing acids. So this is the reason why you have the pH in the mouth decreases. The pH decreases only when there is something acidic. So that is why the answer was A. Now B was wrong. Enzymes in saliva release acids. No, that's rubbish. Salivary glands release acids. No, salivary gland has only mucus and salivary amylase. Sensory neurons in the tongue release. That's absolute rubbish. So tongue cannot release any acid. Then coming to question number 11. Which conditions result in the highest rate of transpiration from a plant? So there were two temperatures and one was 100, one was 60. Sorry, the percentage humidity. Percentage humidity was 60 and then it was 100. And temperature was in degrees Celsius 15, 25, 15, 25. Now, highest rate of transpiration would be when number one, the humidity is less, percentage humidity. So less humid outside, so more transpiration. And the temperature was high, so it was the B. Why? Because at high temperature, evaporation and diffusion of water vapors will be faster. But the percentage humidity had to be less. So which conditions result in the highest? So percentage humidity in the air was less, so more water vapors will diffuse out, and the higher temperature will result in a higher rate of evaporation and a higher rate of diffusion. Then coming on to question number 12. The diagram shows a cut plant shoot. Cut plant shoot means no roots in a container of water. And you have insects sucking sugar from the phloem, and you have a cut plant shoot, and you have oil, and you have water. What will stop the movement of water up this stem? Why would suddenly water not be able to move up the stem? So, a fall in the humidity of the air, a rise in the air temperature, air bubbles in the xylem. An insect sucking sugar from the phloem. Well, see, you've got to understand water doesn't move in the phloem. So phloem was all rubbish. It moves only in the xylem. Water will move up in the stem only in the xylem. So that is why the answer was C, that any air bubble in the xylem would actually form an air block. And this would prevent the movement of water. 13 has also been mentioned in the exam report. The graph shows changes in the blood pressure in the left ventricle of the heart. Now, during which period is the left atrium contracting, which means that the pressure in the ventricle must be the lowest? And the answer was A, because this is the time when the atrial systole contracts. And then, of course, now the pressure in the ventricle is going to rise. So that means blood has flown from the atrium into the ventricle. So this is the left atrium. So please understand, left atrium. This is the left side of the heart. And here you have the bicuspid valve. And it says, shows the changes in the pressure of the left ventricle. At which time is the atria contracting? So the atria will contract, the valves will open, and the blood will flow into the ventricle, and then the valves will close again, and the ventricle will contract. So it will be this part when the ventricle is contracting, then this part the pressure is going to rise, and then it's going to empty and is going to go out in the aorta. So it says which period is the left atrium contracting? So left atrium contracting would be this time before the ventricle pressure starts to rise, because the blood is flowing into the ventricle, so the atria is not going to contract. The atria is going to contract once all the blood is sort of pushed into the ventricle. So it was the part A of it. Please go through the cardiac cycle, and then of course you will know how to answer these questions. Then coming on to question number 14. What are the effects of the following activities on pulse rate when compared to resting pulse rate? So resting pulse rate, slow walking, fast running. What are the effects on the pulse rate? So in both cases, the pulse rate will increase as compared to the resting pulse rate. Slow walking, it will also increase. Fast running, it will also increase. But it will increase more in the fast running. Question 15, the diagram shows capillaries with the direction of movements of materials. What is happening at points 1 and 2? So this is 1 and this is 2. So what is happening at 1? Tissue fluid leaves the capillaries. Yes. And waste products enter the blood. So at 1 you can see this is the blood. These are the capillaries. This is the artery. This is the vein. And then these are the arteries, the capillaries connecting it. And in 1, something is leaving the blood and surrounding the cells of the body. So that is tissue fluid leaves the capillaries. And here what is happening? Waste products enter the blood at 2. You can see things are entering the blood. So waste products enter the blood. So that is why the answer was C. Then coming on to 16. As you come on to question 16, anaerobic respiration takes place when there is a lack of which substance? Well, why anaerobic? I mean, everybody knows there's a lack of oxygen, anaerobic. Then 17, which structure is lined with cilia? Now, this was again one of the um questions which students got wrong. So, that's again a mark with a star. This is mentioned in the exam report. I'll talk about the exam report once again. Even 15 has been mentioned in the exam report. This is also a question which was difficult. So, these are the ones which have been mentioned in the exam report. Please go through the exam report. Now, which structure is lined with cilia? Which structure is lined with cilia? And it was surprising that a large number of students wrote that alveolus is lined with cilia, but somebody was getting it wrong. They thought trachea, alveolus is the same thing. They just remembered something about the gas exchange and the system, the parts of the breathing, inhaling, exhaling. So alveolus was wrong. It was the bronchus which has it, but a large number of students said alveolus. So that means a common error was the belief that the alveoli have cilia. Now that is rubbish. Question 18. Which row shows the state of the muscles when breathing out as deeply as possible? So, diaphragm muscle, external intercostal muscle, internal intercostal muscles. Well, when you're breathing out, exhaling, the diaphragm has gone back. So, the diaphragm is relaxed. External intercostal muscles are also relaxed. Only the internal intercostal muscles are contracted because you are breathing out as deeply as possible. So it's only the internal which will, of course, press on the lungs to sort of squeeze the air out of them. So this was the only one which would be in the contracted state. Then question 19, again, this has been mentioned in the exam report. Men sometimes develop an enlarged prostate gland. Prostate gland. How might this affect urination? Yeah, because you see, when the sperm ducts join the urethra, we have the prostate gland here surrounding it, and the prostate gland surrounds the urethra, so it presses on the urethra if in a man there's an enlarged prostate gland. So how might this affect urination? By preventing the exit of urine from the bladder, because it presses on the urethra, so the person has to strain to pass the urine out, because it's sort of there is a sort of a marginal blockage and the urine cannot be passed on. That's a typical sign of a person a patient who comes to you and says, well, okay, I find it difficult to pass urine because there's some sort of an obstruction, but it doesn't say obstruction, but the person presents as difficulty in passing urine. So by preventing the exit of urine, why? Because it's pressing on the urethra, not the ureter. It's pressing on the urethra. Then question number 20. What helps heat retention in the human body? What helps heat retention in the body? And so what maintains the heat is retained? It doesn't just like you put some hot tea in a thermos, so it prevents heat loss. Similarly, in your body, the fat in and under the skin prevents heat loss, so it helps heat retention. The heat of the body is retained inside. You wear a thick jacket, heat is retained inside your body. And coming to the last question, which is question number 21. The diagram shows the brain in vertical section. Which part is the hypothalamus? You know the hypothalamus is just above the pituitary gland. So this is the pituitary gland. And just above it is the hypothalamus. This was B was cerebellum and C was the spinal cord, because this part would be the medulla and this part would be the cerebrum. So that is why the hypothalamus is the area. D was the pituitary gland. So D was pituitary gland and just above D is the hypothalamus. So that is why A was the hypothalamus. So that completes this video. As I was mentioning to you that you need to look at the exam report, examiner's report for teachers, principal examiner's report for teachers. You must always look at this, and then you can figure out a whole lot of things, because this helps us as teachers, it helps you as well. Now, if you look at it, at the end of this, there is the general comments. Many candidates performed well on this paper and so on, but that's fine. But then comments on specific question. Now, these are the ones which are important. These are very, very important. Now, there's a one on question 7, then question 10, as I mentioned. Then question 13 and 14. These were questions where candidates needed to read the question carefully. In question 13, the graph showed pressure in the heart ventricle, but the question was about the atrium. And question 14, the pulse rate when walking slowly had to be compared to the resting pulse rate. Then question 15, the question about the formation of tissue fluid proved difficult. 17, a common error was the belief that the alveoli have cilia. Then 13, there was confusion between urethra and ureter. So please understand this, reading the exam report is a very good habit, and it helps you to understand which were the difficult questions and how you or other students misunderstood those questions. Understand that you need to read the examiner's report at the end, which I am putting in at the end, and I've gone through it for the questions that were in this paper, and I'll go through it again when we are doing the second video of this. So this is video 1, and then the second video follows in a minute or so.